Hey mamas, you're listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast, the only podcast teaching you how to balance your work, motherhood, and wellness. I am Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist and mama wellness consultant. Each week we dive into tips and strategies and much more so that you too can become a balanced working mama. Let's dive in. Hey mamas, Dr. Amber here, another episode of the Balanced Working Mama podcast. I hope y'all are doing well. Let me get comfortable because today is going to be a more involved episode where I'm really talking about the negative consequences of default parenting. So, if you all have been following along the podcast this season, you all know that we are really talking a lot about default parenting this season. And it's because I want more moms to have more balance. And I know that for many moms, a big barrier has been their inability to get out of this default parent role. They're essentially doing way too much at home. And it's not their fault, and it is a societal issue. We talked about that in the last episode. It is a cultural issue. It is a systemic issue. And that I do believe that there are things that moms can do individually on their own to help unroot and undo some of this. And of course, a lot of this requires some unlearning. And that's what this podcast is all about, helping us to learn a little bit more about these experiences so that we then can look at our life in a different way and figure out where to go from there. So, with that being said, hey, how are y'all doing? I hope that y'all are also enjoying our YouTube channel. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, if you haven't checked out the YouTube, I definitely highly recommend that you do it because on the YouTube, you get to see my lovely podcast studio, which continues to evolve. Y'all see, I got another plant over here, and also I got this little one. Another thing that I'm excited to show y'all a little bit more is just my outfits. So one thing I'm working on, and if you follow me on Instagram, you know this. I am in a place where I just turned 35. I cut my hair. Y'all saw that a few weeks ago. And I'm also really working on my wardrobe. And so I'm really wanting to elevate and uplift the way that I look. And it's because I believe that as women, and especially as moms, motherhood does not have to stop you in doing the things that really make you feel good. And I started to realize that while in this season of my life, I do value comfort. That's why I love my leggings. That's why I love my athleisure wear. That's why I love all the other things that make me feel comfortable. But there was a discomfort in feeling like I was limited to that. And so now I'm really trying to move in a space with regard to my fashion and the way that I'm showing up, and really just kind of pushing it a little bit and being more bold and putting myself out here in clothes that I maybe would not have chosen otherwise. And so I'm excited for that, especially colors, y'all. I want to play around with color and all that, all that. So here I am today. So again, you get to actually see what I look like on YouTube, which is fun. But I hope that y'all are enjoying it. And I'm so glad that you all are here. Shout out to all the new listeners, all the new subscribers. I appreciate y'all so much. And let's undo default parenting. So today I am referencing an article that I wrote on Psychology Today. Many of you may have already read this article. I think I mentioned it in our episode a few weeks ago, but the article is called The Default Parent Syndrome, More Than Just a TikTok Trend. And I wrote that for Psychology Today because I wanted people to understand that, yes, we're hearing more about this idea of default parenting on TikTok, on Instagram, on the internet. However, this is a lived experience. It's an actual, real lived experience that people are having. And just because it's on social media doesn't make it fake. I know that people always like to say, well, it's social media, so it's not real. And I actually take offense to that. One, because a big part of my life is online. It's my online presence. And it's also still my real life. It's another aspect of my life, but it is my life. And the same goes for these experiences that women are sharing online about being a default parent. just because they're sharing about it on TikTok or in Instagram Reels, and even honestly, just because they're like making content that kind of jokes about their experience, it is still a very real lived experience. And there are negative consequences to this lived experience of being a default parent. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk more about, well, what are those negative consequences? Because I think I know that they go beyond what you're thinking on the surface. So today we're going to cover three different areas where there might be some negative consequences for your family when it comes to having a default parent within the family. First, we're going to talk about the consequences for the actual default parent. And we're going to start there because I think, again, whenever we're thinking about negative consequences of default parenting, we automatically assume, well, it's just for the default parent. However, today we're also going to go deeper into, well, what are the negative consequences for the non-default parent? We don't think about that. We just assume that, well, the non-default parent has it great, right? And no, there are actually negative consequences for that parent as well. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit more about the negative consequences of for the child, for the children in the system who are a part of the system that has one default parent and one non-default parent. So let's get into it. Um, let's start with the consequences for the default parent. So for this one, you all, it's pretty self-explanatory. Like if you ask yourself right now, oh, what might be the negative consequences for a default parent? The things I'm going to say to you are probably the things that first come to mind for you. So for instance, chronic fatigue and burnout. If you are a parent who is living in a family system and you are primarily responsible for all of the caretaking tasks, all of the household chores, if you constantly have to carry that mental load for the other partner in the relationship, you are going to experience burnout and you're also going to feel chronically fatigued. Granted, fatigue is can be a normal experience of life, but not chronic, right? Yes, at the end of every day, we are all tired, and that's why we all go to bed and hopefully wake up more refreshed. However, if you're finding that every day, despite going to bed, despite getting more rest, despite, taking care of yourself, you're still fatigued, you might be experiencing a negative consequence of being a default parent. And same for burnout. I actually don't want to say that burnout is a normal experience. It's common, but it should not be normal because burnout really means that you've pushed past your limits. You've pushed past the boundaries that your body has set for you. And it's likely that the signs and the symptoms that your body and your mind has been given have been ignored or undermined or just not heard. And that's what happens when we're in burnout. So being a default parent can lead to all of that. Also, being a default parent can lead to feelings of resentment towards your partner and your kids. Listen, like if you are a default parent, you already know that experience of looking at your partner and going like, life must be easy. Oh, you get to rest. Oh, you're tired. Like, what do you mean? That is that resentment. So if you are having those experiences where your partner maybe just simply walks into the room and you're automatically feeling this rage or this anger or this angst that's coming up, it is likely some resentment because of the misbalance at home. And so that, of course, is not healthy for your relationship. And we really need to make sure that we're undoing default parenting so that resentment doesn't lead to detrimental consequences for your relationship. Same with our children. Resentment for your children can look like you being irritable or snappy when your child is simply just being a child, right? Let's say maybe your child asks you for something when really all you want to do is sit down on the couch. Maybe you literally just sat down and now they're coming to ask you for something and you're just like, rah, right? That happens. And it's a lot of times, if you are a default parent, it's because of that resentment going back to that deeper feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm always doing, like, all I want to do is just sit, all I want to do is just rest, I just need this moment. That is that resentment that has just been brewing, and we don't want that to interfere with our relationship with our kids. Another consequence for the default parent is a diminished ability to care for oneself. This, again, self-explanatory. If you are doing too many things at home, it is likely very hard to find the time to take care of yourself. It can logistically be hard to find the time in your schedule to take care of yourself, but then also energetically, it is hard to find the energy to take care of yourself. And then also mentally, it's hard to even imagine how it's possible because you don't have the capacity. And so the diminished ability to care for yourself, prolonged, can really lead to some other very big consequences for your health, and we don't want that. And then lastly, a decline in your mental health. Oftentimes I have moms either connect with me through Balanced Working Mama or become a therapy client of mine, and they're talking about, my mental health has been struggling. I'm depressed, I'm anxious, and I don't know what's wrong with me, and I just need to get it together. I need to do all these things. When really, when we go deeper, we realize, oh, maybe there's something happening here where you are a default parent. Maybe you are holding more than your fair share at home. And it's not that you need to do something more to support your mental health, and rather it's we need to do something less. We need to find a way and a system and a process that will allow you to do less so that you can rest, so that you can relax, so that you can really restore yourself. And so it's not that you need to do more, rather, it might be that you need to find ways to do less to support your mental health. So, those are the consequences, the negative consequences for our default parents. So, I'm gonna take a deep breath before I move into the next one. Y'all, let me make sure my mic is still on. So, something that happened to me, but look, I'm new to this whole my technology game. I think I got it good, but a few episodes ago, my mic shut off in the very middle of my episode. And so me and my VA had to figure out how to get it going, and we fixed it. But now I'm like, is it working? I think it's good. We're good. We're good. Okay. Let's move on to the negative consequences for the non-default parent. So again, I think it's important to talk about these because we often do not assume that there are any negative consequences for a non-default parent, right? When we think about the non-default parent, we're thinking about like, oh, well, they're just chilling. Like, oh, they're not doing anything at home. Oh, they got it made. They get to just relax. They get to sit, and the kids don't go to them at all. And so we're not seeing how that there's still some negative consequences in that experience. And let's talk about it. So, number one, unrealistic expectations regarding the default parent's capacity, right? This is a negative consequence because what can happen for the default parent is that they have really misperceived and misjudged the default parent's capacity. So let's say you're the default parent, right? Your partner as the non-default parent has no idea what your mental capacity is, your emotional capacity, your mental capacity, your physical capacity. And when they are not aware, that then leads to them becoming disconnected from you and them becoming less of an effective partner and support, period. And that is a negative consequence because that can lead to very detrimental consequences for a partnership in general. And so being a non-default parent means you become disconnected from your partner and your family because you don't really know what's going on, especially with your partner. And we don't want that. The second negative consequence is, and I actually just hit on it, the emotional disconnection and distance from the default parent, who is likely their partner. When you are a non-default parent, there is that disconnection from the reality of what is actually happening. And for a lot of non-default parents, they stay in that disconnected space for years at a time and they really have no idea. And so you cannot be in a supportive partnership. You cannot be in a healthy partnership. You cannot be a healthy, supportive partner if you are that disconnected from what is going on with your partner or in your family. So that is a very negative consequence because it, again, can lead to very detrimental consequences for your partnership, your relationship, and your family. And then lastly, and this one is a big one, y'all. The last negative consequence for the non-default parent is that there is a decreased quality in parenting skill. Like If you are not practicing being a parent because there's someone else doing most of it, of course you're not going to know how to do the things. Of course you're not going to know where the things are. Of course you're not going to know where the child's supposed to be. Of course you're not going to know where the teacher, like, it's because you're not in the practice of doing these things on a daily basis. And so your skills get rusty. And so let's stop a moment to really think about parenting as a skill that we need to be practicing. And we don't think about it that often because, again, for those of you who are default parents, it's just like you're constantly doing it. But as you're constantly doing it, you're building your skill more and more and more and more. You become a better parent every single day because that skill, that muscle is constantly being flexed. However, if you are a non-default parent, you don't get to practice these skills of how to help your child cope, how to help your child get through that tantrum, how to help your child with bedtime routine, how to help your child do this, how to do. If you're not practicing these skills, you cannot be an effective caregiver. But then also, this can lead to ruptures in your relationship with your children. So, this is why it's so important for non default parents to really figure out how to step up and step into the family system in a different way, because you will not be able to develop your skill as a parent if you are not practicing it in a more effective manner, and that can lead to a rupture in the relationship with your kids. Okay, so those were our negative consequences for our non-default parents. Again, there are some, believe me, and we don't want that. Lastly, you all, let's talk about what the negative consequences look like for our children. And again, I don't think we think about this enough. We don't think about how, if our kids are in a home where there's one parent doing most of the things, or there's this unbalance in caregiving task or household tasks, how that affects our kids. And so I have 4 consequences that I want to talk about for kids. 1, unrealistic expectations regarding the default parent's capacity. Yes, this is very similar to one of the consequences for the non default parent, but let's think about it from the child's perspective. Our kids begin to pick up on this idea that, well, mommy's strong. She can do anything. Mommy does everything. Mommy is a superhuman. And that's unhealthy because it's not true. It's not true. And granted, there's parts of us who probably would love for our kids to look at us as being superhuman and can do any and everything. But however, I feel like our children get so much more value out of learning that we actually do need to rest. Maybe mommy does need to take a nap. Maybe mommy does make mistakes, right? Like, I want our kids to grow up seeing that we are human, and they might misperceive our humanity if they're seeing us constantly do more than we are capable of. And so that is a very negative consequence. Our children kind of lose reality when it comes to what we are capable of. The next negative consequence for our kids: diminished expectations for the non-default parent, adding to the level of burnout and overwhelm that the default parent likely feels. So I'm going to say that one more time. Your child will start to expect less from the non-default parent, which then leads to more put on you, and then you having more burnout and more overwhelm. So I did a reel about this on Instagram. If you all are following our Undo Default Parenting series, I'm doing a reel once a week where I share one tip for how to begin to get out of a default parent role. And I believe it was episode 2 of this series. It featured this experience where your child may constantly come to you for requests, and only come to you for requests. And I hear moms say this all the time, like, well, my kids only come to me. They don't ever go to, their other parent. And go check out that reel. Again, episode 2, Undoing Default Parenting series on my Instagram. But I shared a tip for how to redirect those requests. So if you are a default parent and you see that your child is always coming to you and not going to the other parent, we got to redirect that. And so one really easy way is, say, hey, hun, mommy is working right now, or mommy is doing this, mommy is just not able to do this. I need you to go ask daddy, or I need you to go ask whoever the other parent is. Likewise, if you are the non-default parent and you see this keeps happening where your child is not coming to you, not looking to you for things, not expecting anything from you, you can step in and then say like, oh, hun, I could do that for you. Or, hun, let me help you. Or just even ask your child like, hey, how can I support you today? And so we really need to help our children to learn that the default parent, there are boundaries there, but then also with the non-default parent, more invitations to come into that space. Okay. Consequence number 3 for our children: decreased quality in the relationship with the default parent due to the parent's level of fatigue and frustration. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I'm gonna read it one more time because y'all, I feel like this one will probably hit home for so many of you all. A decreased quality in relationship with the default parent due to the parent's level of fatigue and frustration. So I talk about this often whenever I hear moms talking about how hard it is to be a gentle parent or how hard it is to practice conscious parenting, right? And what I always like to remind them is like, this experience of doing parenting differently is hard right now because you are depleted. You are exhausted. You are frustrated, and you are likely suffering the consequences of being a default parent for way too long. Because to be quite honest, gentle parenting is a lot easier when you have the resources, the emotional capacity, the mental capacity to truly do what you need to do to see your child. However, if you are exhausted and frustrated and overwhelmed and fatigued and feeling resentful, it is hard to be gentle, even to the sweetest child. It's hard to be conscious because there's so much in your brain. And so, a negative consequence, honestly, for the child and for the parent is that this can really interfere with our relationship with our kids. And we don't want that because it's not their fault and it's not our fault either. We want to have that closeness, and we really need to figure out, well, how do we undo default parenting in our home so that there is not a rupture or a disruption in the relationship with our kids because I am so fatigued, because I am so frustrated, because I am so tired. Last negative consequence for the kids: decreased relationship quality with the non-default parent due to lack of opportunities for contact and care. Again, this is a negative consequence for the child and the non-default parent. Decreased relationship quality with the non-default parent due to a lack of opportunity for contact and care. And so that goes back to my point of, if you are the non-default parent and you are not practicing the skill of parenting or caregiving because someone else is doing so much more of it, not only are you going to really suffer in your parenting skill, but also you're going to not have a strong relationship with your child, because our relationships with our children are built over time as we continue to care and nurture them. And if that's not happening, or if there's not enough opportunities for that to happen, that will interfere with your relationship with your child. So, you all, I hope that was helpful. There are so many negative consequences for having a default parent role or a default parenting syndrome within our household. And it's really our responsibility to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to undo it. And of course, we need support, we need learning, we need coaching, and that's what I'm here for. I'm hoping this podcast can serve as that. But just know that I believe in you. I know that you all can do this. I want fewer and fewer default parenting syndrome to be showing up in our homes. And we got this. We're going to do it. We're going to do it this year. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this, please share this with another mama, and I'll talk soon. Hey, mama. Thank you for listening to the Balanced Working Mama podcast. If you love this podcast, please be sure to rate it and share it with another mama that you know. And don't forget to follow me and Balanced Working Mama on Instagram. I'll talk to you soon.